Today's episode of Aura's Gist is titled Doctor, Don't Buy That House. The Freedom Delta, Why I Told My Friend Not to Buy That House. When a friend of mine, a doctor who had recently moved to the UK, sought my advice about buying a house, I gave him an answer he didn't expect. Don't buy it. He had just started working in the NHS, newly married, with a baby on the way. Like many, he had viewed home ownership as a sign of stability and success. The bank had pre-approved him for a large loan, enough to buy a big, beautiful house. But I knew better. I told him not to go for it. Not because homeownership is a bad idea. It's a great idea, actually. But because of the long-term strain a high mortgage could impose, especially considering his circumstances. Why I advised him to think twice. The role of a doctor in the NHS is demanding, to say the least. The long hours, emotional toll, and bureaucratic challenges can leave even the most resilient professionals questioning their career paths. My friend was already feeling the weight of the system. He knew he didn't want to remain in the NHS indefinitely and was considering a career change in the next few years. However, he hadn't yet figured out what the next step might be. Committing to a high mortgage would have locked him into his current job, leaving little room for flexibility. Add to that the growing family expenses and the uncertainty of rising interest rates in the UK, and it became clear that buying a house at the top of his approved budget wasn't the right move. The power of choosing less. Instead, I advised him to aim for a property well below the bank's suggested amount, something comfortable, but modest enough to leave a financial buffer. The gap between what he earned and what he spent, what I call the delta, would give him room to breathe both financially and mentally. A few months later, he called to thank me. His life had changed in ways he couldn't have predicted. 1. Rising costs. Interest rates in the UK had gone up, significantly increasing his mortgage payments. But because he'd chosen a smaller, more affordable property, he could absorb the additional costs without sacrificing his quality of life. 2. Family expenses. With the arrival of his baby, his household expenses naturally increased. Still, his financial buffer allowed him to manage these changes with relative ease. 3. Career flexibility. He's now actively exploring opportunities to leave the NHS and transition into a less stressful career. Thanks to his financial discipline, he has 6 months' worth of savings, a runway that allows him to plan his next move without rushing into something out of desperation. Lessons in freedom. The idea of the delta isn't just about saving money. It's about creating freedom to prioritize what truly matters to you. For me, that freedom allowed me to take a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study in Brazil during my master's program. The university covered tuition, but didn't provide funding for flights, accommodation, or living expenses. Because I had saved aggressively during my contracting jobs, I had enough of a financial buffer to spend several months in Brazil without working. That experience, which had been a dream of mine for 8 years prior, only became possible because I prioritized saving over spending on things that didn't align with my values. The lesson: focusing on what truly matters rather than what looks good has shaped how I approach money. It's a mindset I learned from my family, who modeled the value of delayed gratification and intentional spending. They taught me that financial freedom isn't about having the most. It's about having the flexibility to make choices that align with your goals and values. Question for you. 1. Personal reflection. Have you ever faced a situation where financial freedom allowed you to make a life-changing decision? What was it, if you don't mind sharing? How do you prioritize financial decisions that align with your values over societal expectations? 2. Shared experiences. If you've worked in a high-stress job, how have you managed your finances to create a sense of stability? For those who've purchased a home, how did you decide on your budget? What factors influenced your choice? 3. Perspective shifts. Do you agree that living below your means can bring more freedom than aiming for the maximum you can afford? Why or why not? What's your delta? And how are you working to increase it? 4. Future planning. Personally, I think this is the most interesting one. If you could save up a 6-month financial runway, what opportunity would you pursue? What steps can you take today to align your spending with your values rather than societal pressures? The freedom of the Delta is about more than money. It's about peace of mind, flexibility, and living a life that truly reflects your priorities. What does financial freedom look like for you? Let me know in the comments. This has been another episode of Ora's Gist, read to you by the author, Araba. If you'd like to hear more stories like these, check out the links that will appear on your screen, right about there. In particular, you might enjoy the last few episodes. I did an episode titled From Houseboy to Professor, The Legacy of My Grandfather's Sacrifices. I think that's a good one you might be interested in. Another one, which is my personal favorite, is The Russians Used a Pencil. Check those out and let me know what you think. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.